We speak. Our words. We listen.
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 Good evening, everyone. This is the 555 Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 26th of January 2025. This is where we go through the Facebook posts that have been shared on the Autistic Radio's Facebook page and have discussions on the topics. And the first post is from Neurodiverse Journeys. Neurodivergent author, consultant, advocate and coach, autistic, ADHD, PDA, parent to ND children. And basically it's asking a question. Those who have or wanting a formal diagnosis of autism, why was this important to you?
I guess it's a good question. And it was important to me kind of because the troubles that I was having, I needed to resolve in my own mind the root cause of them. And now in my journey, I know that the remedy was almost the same. But at the time, it was like I couldn't not. When I realised that this was like a possibility and my self-diagnosis was like resonating so much, it felt just like a niggle. And I also didn't want to just be, I didn't want to be wrong because I felt like being wrong about it could have consequences. And it gave me a lot of peace, actually, to have my diagnosis and to start to kind of live my life kind of as I've always needed to, really.
I don't know if I have a good enough answer for this one just yet.
The question is a strange one for me because the time I was diagnosed was very young in comparison to a lot of people. When I mean very young, it's still older than many people get diagnosed today. I was diagnosed at 17. And the only reason I was diagnosed is because of a health crisis kind of brought the opportunity up for that to happen. But at the time when I was feeling different, feeling odd, feeling ill, at the time I felt I needed to get an answer. Because in my head I felt, is this me just acting out? Is this me? Because parents, not just parents, everybody around you who was older would always say, you're going through a phase, you're going through the change of life, puberty, etc. And this is a sort of some behaviours that happen in some teenagers. So I was wanting an answer to what the problem I felt was. So I can understand this question for people a lot older that would want an answer to a lot of questions that they had about their life. And I just feel grateful that I got that answer quite early on in comparison. Although it took me some time to actually understand autism because of the way it was portrayed at the time, which was in 1998, to the way that it's portrayed now, within myself and within society.
I have an enormous relationship to this question because I did not choose to get diagnosed. I was informed on, effectively, and being informed on to my GP was, for me, a disloyalty that I still resent. But once that had been set in motion, I didn't go away from it. And I ended up in what people perceive as a privileged position of having a formal diagnosis. And the reason I went into it was because I thought that there was going to be some advantage in that I was going to have the opportunity of going on some kind of late diagnosis course that would add to the understanding of information that I already had. I had already had the neurodiversity paradigm explained, and I was on a journey there to understand that even more. In fact, in the year before my diagnosis, I was pretty well set up with the concept of autism. So when it came to actually being diagnosed and supposedly accessing some kind of service, there wasn't any service. There wasn't any post-diagnosis support by the conventional autism community. And then later on, when I saw post-diagnostic supports being developed, they were terrible. They weren't in any way of any use to me. So I find myself feeling incredibly resentful about the standard autism services out there, diagnosing people in their adulthood and then dumping them with that knowledge. However, if you're listening to this now in the UK, as other people have expressed, there are facilities out there, and there is a community of autistic people who have accumulated enough self-knowledge and they've put it out there free of charge for you. And it's better than anything that you're going to get from most services, with one notable exception in my brain. And even that is just the starting point. So if you suspect that you are autistic, I would encourage you to be autistic about it and do the research yourself and enjoy that as a new identity, the new identity of self-diagnosis. Because in all of the real, genuine neurodiversity affirming spaces, you will never come across a barrier. Diagnosis is an access point to very little, unless by some way you can make it a useful means of maybe getting an extra 20 quid a week on benefits. Other than that, I can't personally see an advantage in the diagnosis journey, but we think there is.
Nicholas says something about regarding myself as a broken neurotypical and now more of a resilient but world-worn autistic woman also helped me recognise ableism when I was experiencing it.
I had realised I was autistic in my mid-20s, but I wasn't diagnosed until 45. When I first was diagnosed, I did get some support. But with COVID, the charity changed, and with the autism team involved, it was all withdrawn, the use of support. There is support out there, but it's not found via social care.
Support is such a broad word. Sometimes it's a word that sounds so simple in terms of someone's support needs and what they want and what they need. Sometimes it's so vast. And I believe that there seems to be a hierarchy and priority list on what autism is worse than others. So what services are provided for others. Like, if you've got this approach where you have a bit of confidence about how you speak, about how you look maybe, you're maybe not taken as serious as you should be because you're masking or because you are acting the way that you are naturally. And then people feel, well, you don't need support, even if you are telling people you do need support. And then there's also the thing about lack of funding and lack of facilities, depending what that support need is. But a lot of support, in my opinion, a lot of support is a listening ear, an understanding room, an understanding setting, a safe place, a safe space, and somewhere that you won't be judged. The next post is from Autistic Not Weird. Articles and insight about autism from Chris Bonello, an autistic author, advocate, speaker, and former teacher. And what Chris is talking about, saying that now more than ever before, it's not just nice to see autistic people by their strength, including those with complex disabilities. It is literally the safer option. We need to start seeing autistic people as being awesome. Then people ask, but what if they're profoundly disabled with huge learning difficulties? They say, then we should still see them as awesome. A person's worth should not depend on whether or not they have a disability. And when society is told that a group of people should never be seen positively, that group start being seen as less worthy of love, respect, dignity, or human rights. And history teaches us how dreadfully that always turns out. So really, it's better to see autistic people as awesome, regardless of their support needs. Their futures are safer that way.
I think it's really serious and really important. And when I read this, what popped into my head is I understand that violence starts with a justification, with a belief. I understand it seems to be part of human nature that there's a justification for violence, whether that's a self-defense or what, there's a justification. And what I'm hearing here is we should never ever be justifying like violence or poor treatment of any of members of our society based on ability, race, like gender, all these things, because when we degrade a group, we justify violence against them, and it affects all of us. And I think that the measure of a good society surely has to be like around compassion, not just some sort of survival of the fittest. And I like the idea that it's not really about the survival of the fittest, but of the most well-connected, that ensures like survival. And isolation is the enemy there.
As I'm autistic, I use narrative. And my story is about where I am here right now in India in a hotel, because the houseboy, or as they are called here, the person who looks after the cleaning of this level of the hotel, is what used to be called deaf and dumb. He's hearing impaired and non-speaking. So I had conversations with him because he does read Marathi, the local language. If I translate it on my mobile phone, I use Google as an alternative communication tool. So I type in and then he reads this beautiful text that comes up on the phone, one word at a time, because reading and writing is something that's difficult to learn in an environment that's restricted on education. But the guy isn't daft. And we had a connection before he spoke to me, because he watched me as I was going around the hotel looking at the architecture, and there was something he noticed about me and I noticed about him when I started to interact. So I spoke to somebody who was also his friend. I thought it was a brother that was a carer in some kind of way, but it turns out they've known each other for 3 years and he's his friend, and they work together in this hotel. And this guy is accepted. There's no even amongst the management, there's nobody rolling their eyes. There's nobody frustratedly saying, oh, you should have done this. He is accepted and valued for the work that he does around the place. And I think that is rather beautiful. This culture is not making him disabled. They are enabling him and valuing him. And he goes around this place happy, and not in that patronizing, condescending way. He seeks me out to have conversations with me, and he's happy. So what people put on disabled people, in inverted commas, is purposeful. It's not necessary to disable somebody who has a different set of skills or a different communication. That is put upon people purposefully by society.
The next post is from Spectrum Sloth, which is a personal blog from a late-diagnosed autistic mama bear. Ace, cats, the sky, painting, sparkly things, trains, languages, memes, she, her. What she shared is about her own autistic diagnosis, or autistic realisation. It's about 5 years since I realised I'm autistic, and I still keep going over things. I'm not sure I'll ever stop having those aha moments. Finding out that you're autistic as an adult is like watching a film with a plot twist at the end. You have to go back to the beginning and look at it again with fresh eyes. Suddenly you can see things you didn't even know to look for.
I like this because it makes the situation creative.
I've been diagnosed 10 years. I'm still finding new things. And just after I lost my dad in the conversation, I just discovered I was ADHD as well. And again, I'm discovering more stuff.
I think it's the journey of life itself, is you keep discovering new things. Not that you feel, well, not that I've ever felt that I know everything, but there's always a surprise, and there always seems to be a twist, a plot twist, or some sort of information that just throws you in a positive way. Sometimes it gives you a fright, but mostly it's been nice and positive and interesting and worthwhile investigating.
I think for me, the plot twist really helped me to understand some of the feedback I'd been getting from other people in my life up until that point. It made sense of some of the distress that I'd seen in my brother and mother, like when I was growing up, and I could not understand what was upsetting them, why they were upset with me. At one point, my brother said it felt like he didn't even have a sister, and it was only really when it dawned on me. I think I was doing the AQ 50 or something, and I was processing how high my score was, and reading the description, seeing myself, and I was like, and it was the same. I'd had similar feedback from people at school that I was hard to connect with, and I couldn't understand it because for me, I was willing to connect. I was interested, but I was just missing the mark for certain people in my life. And my diagnosis has helped me that I accept myself and accept the role that I can play in other people's lives. I think that's what has made such a difference for me in connecting with the autistic community, is because it always feels a little bit easier to be compassionate towards other people. And I think seeing other people, being around other autistic people is helping me to have a bit more compassion with myself too. The validation really helps. And I do hope that young people growing up autistic now won't have that same sort of need for validation. And though I'm trying to sort of esteem myself, it's so nice after all these decades to speak to other people who are saying, me too, or something similar like that, rather than to just feel like such a puzzle to myself.
Yeah. When I first went to, it was the Strathclyde Autistic Society that I was referred to not long after my diagnosis, which was based in Glasgow. And it was an organisation which promoted like social inclusion, had social groups and things like that. And it was starting a sort of Thursday group, and it was every second Thursday, or maybe a Thursday a month, and just this amongst people, and then say something, explain something that I've said before to somebody else, even a friend, and even though they're trying to be understanding, they've not got a clue what I'm talking about. But when I'd shared it with somebody else in one of these groups, it's like they identified right away. And that connection itself was just feeling a connection that somebody understands what you're talking about, and it's not just all in your head.
I suppose that's the masking, because I used to get away with it quite well when we were out in pubs drinking. Friends would just sort of smirk and go, there he goes, he's off again. But it wasn't like challenging or critical. Whereas sometimes when you did that in sort of like an intoxicated company, you could become quite wearing on people and they would let you know.
The next post is from Joy of Autism. It's a personal blog. This page is dedicated to my son Jacob and for all the autistics and their families and friends. My goal is to inform, advocate, educate and share smiles. And it's talking about autistic people and employment. Did you know about 85% of autistic people are unemployed? Only 30% of autistic people disclose their diagnosis to employers. Autistic adults earn 40% less than their peers. Autistic adults are often underpaid and only part-time. Only 1/3 of autistic adults are employed within 2 years after high school. And autistic adults face a much greater rate of workplace bullying and unfairness.
Well, for me, it's a question of whether or not you really want to be employed or not. But I'll open up the space a bit while I ponder it a bit more.
Well, my life is, I find, generally unorthodox, but quite inspiring as well. Because I used to feel terrible that I hadn't been employed for such a long time. I can remember in school, I was actually terrified of work experience, and I actually refused to do it. I don't know if schools still do that now, but what it was is people would go to a place and for a week go to this location and sort of do some sort of training or some sort of experience. I don't know because I never did it, and I never really asked anybody that did do it. And I felt I was the only person that didn't go. And I felt so stupid in not going and felt like, why am I refusing to do this? But I just had this fear about it. And because of the way my schooling ended, which was in a health crisis, I ended up going to college as a new start. And it was like a 2-year, I was 17, so it was 2 years up to I was 18. And it was a bursary. There was a funding to help me. I still lived at home at the time, which helped, but the bursary helped me with costs, travelling costs, and buy other things. But once that ended, I felt like a bit of a lull. And I still felt I cannot get into employment. It's terrifying. But I felt working class guilt, I call it. Because everyone around me was working. My siblings were younger than me and they started working and I wasn't. But then I realised to myself that working is different from employment. Because what I ended up doing is I ended up doing volunteering. And the flexibility of volunteering helped me to mould into an interest and actually work quite effectively, particularly in things like admin and actually sometimes even managing things without getting a big like story about it. But I always had that fear of employment. And what hasn't helped is when I became more confident of giving it a go, because I went through all these different kind of programs, working for you in Western Barnshire, which is to help people in disability, mental health or autism, but to try and help you get employment, or at least get somewhere that you feel it structures your life, if you can't, which I already had. But the thing that always put me off, and I've talked about this many times before, is the way that the job interviews go. And the pressure that you're aware that the employer will be under, as well as the interviewee. And you know that the way that society is kind of money driven and it's time driven and it's pressure. So I always felt kind of out of the loop, and going for a job interview was basically tokenistic in many ways, because I came onto this disability thing. It just feels like they were just speaking to you just to tick a box. And it was very difficult to the job interview anyway, to actually sell myself properly, because you need to train yourself on how to talk. And basically a lot of people get through life actually by bullshitting and spinning, as we're probably all aware of, and they're good at it. And what they don't know is they sort of spin it a bit, and then they may learn on the job, or they may just get away with it. But it's just something that kind of lingers with me even now, the employment, and how I understand that can be such a nightmare scenario for many people.
I think there is a big difference between work and employment.
There's a comment from Robbie on the page. With being autistic, I struggled at school. I was bullied by both children and teachers. Most of my energy was just surviving. I was held back with subjects I was good at because of the ones I struggled with. When I left, I did not meet the entry requirements for college, so I could not catch up. By the time I returned to college as a mature student, it was too late. I had gained the qualification but was too old. It was the same with apprenticeships. I was too old. Almost all jobs were advised as school leaver or older with experience. There was, however, no means to get experience. All that was on offer was agency jobs or 0-hour contracts. I could not cope with that uncertainty. And that's something I can certainly identify with, the uncertainty part.
I now can't even do voluntary work. The last attempt, I was forced to use public transport to get there. I became ill on the way back. And because I got someone to contact me to try and get me as far as the bus station, because I was feeling faint, I had a meltdown and they passed that information on. I was removed from the voluntary job.
Yeah, it's stressful. There's a lot of commitment and responsibility to take on with employment. I sometimes wonder who really did well at school, because I knew a lot of people who couldn't wait to leave, in fact left school quite early. And if I could call anybody normal, they're normal because they kind of fit right in. But they hated school. And I did well at school, but I hated school too. And so who enjoyed it and who did well there?
The previous voluntary job, I'd worked 10 years, no problems, because the employers worked round the things I couldn't do. They didn't make anything that stressed me out. And the previous one to that worked until the change of manager for the same reason.
Yeah, it's all individual dependent on who's the manager, who's there, and who you're connecting with, who's basically running the show. But on Jill's point, turning it round, there's people out there with skills. There's opportunities out there for autistic people to be employed, to get involved. And the thing is, was the message has always got to be kind of put out there. There is all these issues, but a lot of these issues isn't always down to the individual. It's down to the way society and the culture is. Pressures And I think a lot of these pressures affect everybody in a way, and they hamper success in many ways for people. The demands, the speed that things need to be done by. But the strangest thing is, the things that I do, I'm always trying to do things as quickly as possible. And I have to actually tell myself to slow down. So it's just a weird one. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but there is a positive spin on it. And it's basically telling autistic people they are worthy. I know it's not something that should need to be said, but some people need for it to be heard or seen or read. And it's good to share that. Because some people just feel so excluded and they feel so bad about themselves because they feel that they're not able to do anything because they can't get employed or because they don't feel they'll be accepted into somewhere that's voluntary either.
The biggest hurdle to me working is ableist safeguarding teams that won't work with professionals that understand autism. Officially, it's supposed to be about stopping harm coming to people, but it's more about protecting the organisation than it is the people working there or using the organisation.
The next post is from Neurodivergent Lou, who's a blogger finding a place in a neurotypical world. And what they've shared is 27 ways hyposensitivity might show up as an autistic person. It's a presentation. I'll just go through some of them. Unexplained injuries due to walking into objects, the urge to chew, high pain threshold, handwriting with heavy pressure, craves salty, crunchy or spicy food, make a lot of noise, like speaking loudly, loves concerts, shopping centres and other loud spaces, craves fizzy drinks, may be attracted to light and bright colours, including staring at the sun, enjoy making noises like humming and singing, may not notice loud noises, enjoys sitting under heavy objects, enjoys spinning in circles, enjoys thrill-seeking, like going on roller coasters, skydiving, may eat loudly and take large bites of food, prefers tight clothing.
I just put in the text that I liked it because of the heavy handwriting pressure. I always did that because I remember going right through pages when I was a kid at school. And to this day, I still hold my pens and pencils incorrectly. They suit me, but give me calluses too. So that I never learned to do those things correctly.
Yeah, similar. I related to it in terms of craves the salty, crunchy or spicy food. I've got a fixation on Golden Wonder salt and vinegar crisps because they're the strongest, most intense ones that I've found. And I can tell when my life's going really well because I don't eat them very much. And the more stressed I am, the more crisps I need. I do worry about my kidneys a wee bit with it. And I'm not into sweet stuff, but I love an Aqua Libra. And I find if I've got like a cold can of the bubbles, I love that too. And the heavy stuff, it's another thing I go to if I'm feeling dysregulated is weight. So I love a weighted blanket or a weighted cushion or a dog on my knee. And I've really realised that like hoodies are my favourite and I love the weight of them as well. And I know you can get weighted hoodies and it sounds pretty good. But then I do notice that I have to be sensitive to sometimes my body changes what it needs and I have to respond to that, which can take a little bit of catching up to.
And yet a lot of people, even non-autistic people, do some of these things. So I think we have to be careful sometimes that we don't assume a lot of these things are rules or typical.
Yeah, similar strategies that people use when they're recovering from trauma as well and working with the sensory system. I think that there's so much to learn about interoception and how that helps to regulate you. It's a bit like a conversation I had with Jules recently about action and taking action and being grounded in the present. And it seems to be so important to remember the body, every day.
Good point. Trauma is general.
It does go on a bit with other things, just to continue the conversation a bit. Likes tight hugs, not notice that hands or face are dirty. May not realise own strength, struggles to sit down. May struggle to remember about personal space. Likes to touch everything. Love to jump up and down. Struggles to remember where objects are in a space.
Well, that's why I used to struggle with social environments, was because I had to sit down for too long. I wanted to get up and move around, but that's not allowed in places like cinemas and things like that.
Few more. Spends time in the noisiest part of the house, for example, the kitchen. May not feel extreme temperatures. Smells objects like grass, pens, etc. And often rocks backwards and forwards.
I loved smelling things, but I would disagree that the kitchen's the noisiest part of the house. I find it quite peaceful at times.
Well, thanks everybody. It was a great discussion tonight. It's quite intense, funny in places, passionate in others, angry in some, but all ending on a positive note, and it's been enjoyable. I also thank everybody that shared those posts that we were able to talk about tonight. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 26th of January 2025, which is part of the 5:55 PM Spectrum Voices conversation here every Sunday. So this has come to the end, and I'll hand over to Jules.
Hello and welcome to Autistic Radio. We do have an open session called the 444, and it's an easy way to remember. It's 4:44 PM every Sunday, reliably, for the autistic community to have a place where we can meet up with other autistic people, and usually the conversation has some kind of relationship to autism. Today was lovely because people were bouncing off each other on their experience of the media, and it became one of those conversations where there was a shared group thing going on. It doesn't always happen like that, but what we do as a group is we welcome in other people. One of the things that we do here at Autistic Radio is try to welcome the other members of the community, particularly those that are experiencing their idea of autism for the first time. Sometimes they call us late diagnosed, which makes us feel as though, well, late to the party, adult diagnosed. We also make programs about the relationship of autism to the rest of the world in different themes. Currently, we're in the middle of a few different program streams. And the one I'm most actively involved in is a new one that Nicola is leading. She has a whole broad idea about the idea of traveling. We've started in a very far-flung way because I'm here in India, and the idea of an autistic person confronting their own autism in such a different place is a way of accessing conversations about autism. But the subtle thing that Nicola is putting to this is that leaving your house is also a traveling experience. And as we talk about these things, the similarity between the bizarreness of my travel experience and an autistic person leaving the house on the bus to go to the local town is becoming really marked. We're all different in our autism, but what we share is enormous. A couple of other things to mention about what we're doing. We're involving and facilitating different advocates to come and make series of programs. The newest one, Scott Frazard, is somebody that we'll be returning to soon. I know that the first one in his series that is out there is a very inspiring listen. Another person in the bag is the bearded behaviorist. This fellow is an autistic man who has so much education behind him and has been also instrumental in trying to explain to the behaviorist community the sensibilities of the autistic experience. So, despite the fact that he has behaviorism in his title, we're going to discover as we record with him a clear description of autism that is very much within the neurodiversity paradigm. I feel that the team here at Autistic Radio and the various people that support us around the world with their comments in their emails, we're reaching a position where the disparate twigs are binding together into something that is stronger. And I hope that as we go forward, you will put your twig alongside ours, because we do need, in these difficult times when the word autism is being associated with all kinds of difficult concepts, we need that solidarity. Autistic Radio is part of a revolutionary change in the paradigm of how autism is viewed.
Spectrum Voices Conversation is an Autistic Association production for autisticradio.com. If you have something to share with us, if you need a voice, you can make different kinds of programs with us. You can make a 10-minute short, or you can join us for a podcast to talk about a subject that is dear to your heart or something you think needs a wider audience. We have an open door policy for divergent views. We do not necessarily agree with everything that we share on our Facebook pages or the words expressed in our podcast. There are a lot of different divergent views which we are trying to allow get aired so that people can see things from different people's vantage points. We hope that you will join that conversation. Contact us through any of our links, Facebook, by email, directly to us.